I was trying to accommodate your schedule there. Again, the recommended candidates meeting be conducted by video conference will save some on expenses, and I think it can be just as effective. As we go in, if you will, it will become difficult, obviously because of the virus and what we're dealing with now. How we move forward when we get into the interview process, something that we'll have to monitor. And if we do reach the peak of our curve and things start to flatten out here in a week or two or three, we could be in the clear by the time June rolls around. A couple things to consider, the retirement boom is upon us. We're seeing this consistently where a number of city managers, city administrators are retiring out. The talent pool behind that group isn't necessarily as strong. A number of different reasons. One is just size, from the boomer population down to the next generation, about half the number of people. And unfortunately, we don't believe public sector service is as honorable a profession as it used to be. We're seeing the impact of social media. A lot of people are person in charge, and we're finding kind of a reluctance, if you will, from the assistant city manager ranks, oftentimes where they're very comfortable in that number 2 position and aren't interested in moving to the top. Add in, you have an election coming up where I believe 5 out of the 7 are up for election. So that could be a significant change coming in the fall. Residency requirement, that's another we did before, and we can do it again. So it's just, again, I'm very disappointed that we're here. I'm very disappointed that a severance package was most likely into play. I'm sorry to have caused that to you, and I'm sorry to be coming back to do this process again. I guess I just want to emphasize you've got my full attention, just like the first time around. We are very proud of the processes that we run and the placements that we make, and I'm anxious to get this one wrapped up and have someone that serves you for a number of years to come. I'm open to questions, or don't know if you need more information. I know there's one board member that I have not met, Mr. Burge. Look forward to interacting with you, but also the others are familiar faces, which is also pleasant.
Phil, this is Mayor Hodson. I appreciate that and the layout of the timeline, as well as the pitfalls, because those were a couple of my questions. Were what's the pool looking like out there? Because I know that we're not the only city that is out for looking for a new city manager. The challenge of an election year was something that was weighing on my mind as well, because you're looking at 7 of us that are up, which is unusual. Not 7 of us, sorry. There's Councilor Berge's up. We have 5 of us. Thank you guys. New math, sorry. That could present a challenge for someone stepping into the role, not knowing what the landscape's going to look like. I will open it up. I think, Greg, you looked like you had a question, so I'll give you the floor first.
Well, this is a strategy that would only be the one that we could pursue if we are willing to open it up to a national search. It seems to me that we've kind of been interested in someone who is familiar with Oregon budget laws, or at least regional awareness. But I've become aware of a practice of recruiting in the Rust Belt, and I'd be interested in hearing our consultants' take on that. The Pacific Northwest sells itself, and the idea of someone wanting to relocate from a less desirable to a more desirable may give us an edge. I think last time we only recruited regionally, but I just wanted to throw that out as some way of expanding the pool.
I appreciate your comments. It wasn't actually an international search last time through some of the advertisements that we placed. But we did advertise that we had a preference for Oregon experience. You're absolutely right. And that will be, and I'm sure it was, a filter at that point in time. Also, the public aspect of the process in Oregon, when you get down into the finalists, where these candidates are named and where that doesn't jeopardize their current employment. Again, hurdles that have to be overcome. But I've been open. I can, as an example, Port Townsend, I shouldn't say obviously, but he had prior Seattle experience, wanted to come back to the States. So our reach is strong. If the council is open to looking at folks from the Rust Belt, my high school years were in Pittsburgh. I know Ohio and Pennsylvania very well. We can pull from those markets as well. Absolutely. Won't say no.
Any other thoughts on that? Councilor Spoon?
Yeah, I would agree with Greg. I think the goal here is to get the best possible candidate, and I don't see any reason to exclude people that are interested in being here, even if they haven't been here. If we decide that we have enough good candidates from Oregon that we don't need to pursue further someone from outside of the area, that's a decision we can make at that point. But now, for me, the goal is to get the best possible candidate we can, and I have no objection to expanding the geography. If we decide not to interview them because we have enough good local ones that maybe have more experience with local budget making, then we can make that decision.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate that.
Tim, go ahead. You need to unmute, Tim.
There we go. Phil, can you remind me when we meet on June 17th, we're going to only be looking at applicants that you've already run through your initial sieve. You'll toss out those that are obviously unqualified, or are you going to rack and stack all of them?
I'm not sure I know your terminology is very in the information that we provide to you for that recommended candidates meeting, you'll have a listing of all the candidates, their name, their agency, their title, and those, and then kind of further narrowing it down to those that I conducted a preliminary interview with and sent a supplemental questionnaire to. So at that meeting, if there's anyone in that list that you say, gosh, what about Sally from Pittsburgh? Why did you pass over? I will have her resume, and someone will come in and say, I used to live in Pittsburgh, and I think this is a great opportunity, and you should really reconsider. And absolutely, we fast track it then, send them a supplemental questionnaire, conduct a preliminary interview, and determine if they are the quality that you're looking for the final interview process.
Great, thanks for the reminder. So we'll only really be intensely reading the ones that have passed your first cut.
That's good.
Any other thoughts on the recruiting process before maybe diving into discussing any changes to, profile and whatnot? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. So if everybody has had a chance maybe to take a look at the job description from last time, and any tweaks, anything different that we want to highlight, accentuate in a different way. I think to Councilor Parker's point, and Phil, I think you hit on, was the idea of, making, if we do go national, maybe taking out the caveat of a preference for a regional piece. I think could be a great addition. Council President Dale, you had something?
Yeah, just wanted to hear an update from Phil as to whether he thinks our salary range aligns with the market, or if we need to adjust.
If you remember, we had that conversation at the end of the process last time around. Mm-hmm. We were looking at what was ahead of us at that point in time. I do believe your salary range is still a little bit on the low side. particularly add in the utility aspect of the city. I have not done a recent salary survey in the state of Oregon, so I say that more from a gut feel, not from any statistical analysis. That's something we might be able to put together quickly and might give us some more feedback as to what the salary range should be.
I just wanted to be careful, Mr. Mayor, that we don't filter out really good candidates for the sake of, say, 10% or whatever Phil thinks is appropriate.
Yeah, I'm seeing some, I think I'm seeing some head nodding that that's the case. That, I mean, we kind of ran into this last time, right, with it being a little bit on the low side, as Phil was saying. Because we posted it at 130 last time, is that correct? Anyone?
Posted at between 125,000 to.
Okay. Council Park?
We may want to bring that up to like maybe bring it up by $25,000 on the high end.
Okay. Council Parker?
I took a look at the job description, and I think everybody did a pretty good job on the language, the skills, knowledge, abilities. I think what we have on paper is very good. I'm not sure that part of the process is what needs to be tweaked. With deference to Joe, there are parts of the process that I'd like enhanced, but I don't think it's at the front end.
I'll come back to that piece in a second, Councilor Parker. Sean, did you have something to say, or was it just the salary piece?
Yeah, just the salary part, thinking that we need to expand the range a little bit. I think that anybody that's looking, that's been above that range might be a good candidate. If we have too low of a range, I think it might limit some people. So I definitely think we need to expand the range. It doesn't pay them at the high end of it once they're hired. I just think we should expand the range in order to attract maybe some better candidates.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Spoon?
I had a question for Phil too. I know one of the things that we had in there from last time, and I'm just remembering from last time, I should have gone back to reread the job description today and I didn't, and I apologize, but I recall there being, a preference for a master's degree. And my question to Phil is that, are we maybe missing candidates that have the experience that we're looking for because we're emphasizing a degree that may or may not be standard for the role? And because I don't do it, I'm not sure. So I was just wondering if you could give me some feedback or guidance there.
I think the way we list it, it's desired, it's desirable. It's something that candidates take a look at, but I don't think they self-disqualify themselves by not having the master's degree. And I think it's nice to put it out there, and if they have it, then do look at it as a bonus, kind of a higher level of training, if you will. So I'd leave that aspect in. I don't have an issue.
Councilor Berge?
Phil, you broke up on my end when you were talking about the salary. You said it was between 125 and what?
150,000 annually.
Thank you. That's all I had on that.
So did we want to, I guess that's the dialogue piece, do we want to expand that to like 160? Like I'm looking for, do we want to pitch a number now? Greg, you're saying that's good or higher?
Well, I take the advice of Phil, and maybe he doesn't have an answer tonight. Maybe we do need to do a survey, and also take a look at it nationally. I mean, just pulling out as an example, in the Rust Belt, what are city managers being paid? I don't want to spend any more than I have to. So I'll defer to Phil on this. Is if 10% more, 20% more is going to have an effect. You tell us what a good route is, because I think my feeling is that at this point, I'm not interested in saving pennies. I'm interested in saving the city. So let's get somebody in here, and you tell us what's a competitive salary that'll get somebody's attention.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Spoon?
Well, then I would like to go ahead and conduct a salary survey in the state. So we'll move in that direction. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I agree with Greg. I mean, I wonder in retrospect, if we could have gotten some better candidates the first time around, if we were more in line with the other cities that we're competing with for the best pool of candidates. And I remember specifically the one that I was most excited about. On paper, he ended up not even continuing with the interview because he had an opportunity somewhere else. And so I just want to make sure that we're competitive as an employer. Because we're a city administrator strong city, and because we are missing department heads and we need someone really capable, and if that costs us more money to put us in line with the other cities, then I think that's the appropriate move. So whatever Phil comes back with in survey, I'd be interested in.
Councilor Berge?
I'm not sure, I wasn't part of this process the first time. I do know that I work with 3 headhunting firms quite a bit, and we don't even bring in the salary. We bring in the candidates, and then from there we put together an offer letter based on their qualifications and their background and that kind of stuff. So Phil, when you're doing this, are you guys reaching out and getting people based on salary, or are you getting people based on the position and then we work towards a salary after the fact, if that makes sense?
I'm going to say it's a little bit of both. You have a salary range, and when you advertise the range, most candidates realize, they're not going to come in at the top. You're looking for some sort of a sweet spot in the middle. So I think, the salary plays an important part, but when it comes from my looking, if you will, and my screening, I'm looking for the qualifications of the candidate. Do they match what you're looking for? Is there a fit? And then as we move closer, and obviously if they become a candidate of choice, you're absolutely right. That initial step is we create an offer letter. You put in a salary amount, it's your call. And then if the candidate counters, we deal with it at that point in time.
Yes, Councilor Berge. Trey, did you have another question?
Should be able to unmute himself.
There we go. Too many things were popping on it. So based on that, what you're saying there, maybe we just say it's between 125 and 200. And that way you have a full gamut of people that come in and throw their name in the hat. And then based on their qualifications, their background, their job history, their job titles and stuff like that, then we can put together an offer letter. And that should give us a great reach in this area as well as any area. And it saves you time. You don't even have to do the digging into finding out what the local market is providing.
I like that it can go, the more quality candidates you might attract. Now, the concern is you don't want to advertise a range that you'll never feel comfortable in paying or even getting close to. So if you went from 125 to 200, and there'll be the candidates out there that are currently at the 150, 160, and they're looking for the 180. So I just want to kind of caution you. You could very well attract a very strong pool of candidates with that high of a salary for the size of the community, you could very well leave the marketplace. But again, you need to be comfortable in meeting the needs of that candidate at that range. So my gut's telling me, and I don't like to work just from my gut, is let me do a little bit of a salary survey. We might be able to have a resource with the state of Oregon that might be able to shorten that process up. But I'd like to look at some comparable cities, size-wise, and see what they're paying. I don't want to set you up to, how can I say, generate a tremendous pool of quality candidates, but they're all looking for $200,000 salaries. That's not the goal.
Okay. Any other comments on or questions regarding salary piece for now? No, not seeing anything. So we thought so far, so job description wise, we seem to be okay. There doesn't seem to be any changes on that end. We're going to do a salary search and just kind of see where we're at regarding that and what that might look like. Any other, Councilor Parker, you said you had some thoughts.
Changing the geography.
Thank you.
Opening the geography up.
Thank you. Opening the geography up and being less concerned about a regional candidate and just looking for best candidate nationally. Councilor Parker, you had mentioned something more about process on the back end. I'm guessing more about the interview or processing. Am I correct on that?
Yes, and I don't need to spend a lot of time in open meeting going through details like that. It's the sort of thing that maybe as we get closer to that period, we can each share with you and you can compile a list. But I'm thinking about background information, prior work experiences, that sort of thing.
Okay, sounds good. Phil, does this give you a good head start? Like we're pretty good then based on what you're hearing?
Yes. I mean, I'm sure we'll have follow-up conversations as we go through the draft of the candidate profile. I will treat it as if it is a draft. We'll send it up to you to have you take a fresh look at it. If there's any sort of changes, you'll see the wording that I'll use as far as opening it up, not just Oregon experience. Take a look at the schedule, make sure that meets your needs as far as everyone's availability as we go into the summer. And absolutely. Yeah. I agree with Councilor Parker. I thought the candidate profile that we created last time around was very well received. Photographs, it looked great. So I don't have any hesitation going back out with that piece again. So,
okay.
Yeah, it's a good start.
Councilor Spoon, you had your hand up?
Yeah, maybe it's more of a conversation for later in the process, but one thing that I've thought about since we went through it before, and this might be more in phone conversations with applicants or in somewhere in the interview process, is an understanding of the culture of our community and how tight-knit we are and how all the different districts kind of work together and how integrated our community is compared to maybe some other ones, and how important I think thinking back in strengths of different administrators we've had, ones that really were collaborative in nature, it really works well here. And I'm not sure we had that conversation last time. And maybe that's for another part of the process, but just to open that conversation up.
I appreciate that. We're working with regional agencies as far as moving the city forward. Appreciate that.
Any other feedback, thoughts for Phil on this right now? Or if not, then Councilor Parker?
Just because it's not going to cost us any more money. This whole thing feels like some sort of a big simulation social experiment. At some point in this, it would be interesting to reflect upon you on how a recruitment in these days and virtually has changed. It's just kind of interesting for me to see how we are adapting, just like the Zoom meeting we have here. But it would be interesting to get those reflections as well as we emerge into leaders into a world that we haven't seen before. And you may be able to tell us some things that will help us in our future administration.
I appreciate it. We're all in this together. Every day's a new day. I mean, I'm learning things as we go. We're trying to, how can I say it, digitize a lot of our services as best we can. And we're practicing the social distancing and shelter in place here in California. So we have to adhere to that. And, I've had different clients approach it in different ways. Depending on the actual position, we're moving forward with the process. We're just conducting the interviews via Zoom. Others that involve an outside panel or possibly a peer group or a community panel, they've put the process on hold until we know more. So it could be a month or 2 or 3 down the road. That's kind of, it's all out there. We just don't know.
And that's good for us, for the communities who are going to put it on hold.
Phil, do you have any questions for us or comments at this point? Anything more you
I
need?
do have a question. But I think, when we were doing this last time around, your city was dealing with a lot of high growth issues. You had the business part, a lot going on as far as economic development. Has that changed, or is that still the thrust of the city, the desire? That's my question.
That is still that's still our status. We are currently in uncharted territory, and it's going to be an interesting Canby on the backside of this. So now leading into it, coronavirus, it was housing was on a steamroll of about 100 new homes a year was our track, what we've got forecasted. We have a number of business development pieces going on in our industrial park that have finished. One that's almost near completion, one of our biggest projects yet. There's talk of a couple other big projects for our industrial park. So that piece prior to all this, that held true. Now, I think it's going to have to be a look at how do we really bring back and bounce back our Main Street and our small business community on the backside of this. I know we're only 3 weeks into it, but I've had a lot of phone call conversations with a number of our small business owners that they're getting everything from I've got great landlords that are helping me out to I've got a landlord that's telling me that I'm out. If I can't make a payment, I'm out, and they've got other people online to take the spot. So it's going to be a new dynamic for sure.
And I think everyone will be dealing with that same dynamic. Absolutely, the dominoes that keep on falling. So,
for sure. Any other comments or questions for Phil? And we'll get this wrapped up and take a 10-minute break before going into our council meeting, and we can refill coffee cups or whatever, water or coffee or water, right? So, all right.
well, thank you for allowing Peckham and McKinney and myself to come in and pick this up where we kind of dropped the ball, I guess. And we're going to work really hard to get it right this time.
Phil, and please understand, I don't think it was a matter of a drop ball. We felt you guys as a company did a really good job, and if we didn't, we would back. Caveat or no caveat, okay? At least my perception is that we enjoyed working with you and the outfit, and you brought us good candidates, and the process is what it is, and we'll just leave it at that. So you do a good job, you do quality work, and I suspect it, and I'm confident that that'll be the same thing on this one as well.
Count on it.
Okay. Phil, thank you.
All right, everyone.
Everyone, thank you. Appreciate it. And see you back here in about 8 minutes. Thank you, Phil.
Brian, it's the same
Gotcha.
meeting, right? We
Thank
can
you.
just.
Good evening, Canby, and welcome to the April 1st, 2020 City Council virtual meeting. This is not an April Fool's joke. We are bringing you city business live and, well, for us, it's in color on the computer. So we have a full agenda this evening, and so we welcome you all and thank you for tuning in and watching. We just finished up a work session discussing the city administrator hiring standards, criteria, and policy directives with the recruiting firm. We had a great conversation regarding that, and so we'll be setting a pretty aggressive timeline for that here coming up first part of the summer. So we will kind of move into, we've got Councilor Berge and Councilor Varwig have American flags behind them. So thank you, gentlemen. We'll dispense with the Pledge of Allegiance here virtually, and we'll get right into communications. Ms. Cyber, anything that you want to relay right now?
Hi, good evening. No, don't have anything under communication, but I will have some comments under city administrator business later in the agenda.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Next on the agenda is citizen input and community announcements. Right now, we had asked, the reason we are kind of keeping, again, this is our first shot in terms of a virtual meeting for the city council, and so we had asked for citizen input or any community announcements to be emailed to Melissa Bissett, our city recorder, to forward out. And really the only thing I think we saw in much of the exchange this week were regarding an agenda item, so we'll move that to there. I didn't see anything else come across. Melissa, were there any other community announcement pieces?
No, I did not receive any other.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving down the agenda, moving into mayor's business. Well, can't say that I have any liaison reports or anything along that nature. I will say that I've had a number of, since our last city council meeting in the beginning of the coronavirus and the stay home, stay healthy order from the governor. I've had a series of conference calls with the governor's office, as well as with the League of Oregon Cities, which I know a number of the city councilors have been on, as well as mayors from across the state. There's a lot going on. There's definitely a new sense of reality. It's strange. The freeways are clear. It's weird being seeing the council here on my screen versus being there in council chambers. So it's an adjustment. We're 3 weeks into it. I wish I could tell you I knew how long this was going to be. I don't know. We did last week and this week, myself, our interim city manager, Amanda Zeiber, along with the school superintendent, our police and fire chief, and then the Chamber of Commerce director today did a kind of a city update on what kind of each of those organizations have been working on and what's kind of coming down the line. I got to give a lot of credit to Kyle Lang, who's the Chamber Executive Director, and then Jamie Stickler, our Economic Development Director, who have been already jumping in and looking at a variety of things that can be done, talking to a number of businesses, talking to a number of organizations. So they're already starting to put together a plan. I know that I've had conversation with our representative, Christine Drazen, regarding potential emergency session that the governor may call, and if they do, there's a list of economic pieces that were at the foreground of the conversation. So I'm very encouraged about the things that were on that list. And I know there'll be more to come. I know the chambers of commerce are doing conference calls as well and encouraging businesses to be involved. The county commissioners are doing a series of conversations in the coming days and weeks as well. So needless to say, Canby, there's a lot of good that's going on in all of this as well. I got to tell you the pieces that I've seen and heard about from the Canby Center and the amount of food and support that they're giving, St. Patrick's Church and their the amount of food and assistance they're providing. It's everything from gift cards from community members. There are community members here. There's a group of quilting ladies that pulled together and have been putting together masks for our assisted living communities and for workers and for people just that want the face coverings while they're out and about. So it has been amazing to see in this situation. Canby again comes forward and steps forward and does amazing things. So thank you. I know it's easy for me to say stay positive, but it takes a lot to stay focused and get through this, and which we will, and we will come out on the backside of this better, I think, that in the future. So that's all that I've got regarding mayor's business right now. We'll kind of move around my screen here and see if there's any councilor comments and liaison reports. We'll start with Councilor Berge. No, he's shaking his head no. Okay. Council President Dale, do you have anything that you want to say?
Just a reminder that Cub is practicing basically the same policy as the city. For work at home, their offices are closed. Things are all by online and phone. However, Veolia continues to operate in person, as do our electrical crews, and the regular emergency call-outs are all still in place.
Great. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Councilor Varwig?
I don't have anything this time, no.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Parker?
The only thing I have is that as a member of the Clackamas County Fair Board, we just got a report on cancellations, either that we have been forced to do because of the requirements, or people voluntarily. And as you would imagine, the fairgrounds events are pretty significant and things that have been canceled. So we are having our regular Fair Board meeting next Thursday to take a look at what the future holds and what that means financially, given the fact that if this isn't over by August, we won't be having a county fair. But I'll have more for you all next time we meet.
Great. Thank you, Greg. Appreciate that. Councilor Spoon?
No, I don't have anything. All of my meetings were also postponed for obvious reasons.
Great. Thank you. Councilor Hensley, anything?
Likewise, my liaison meetings have been postponed or canceled, and the next suicide prevention task force meeting will take place tomorrow via Zoom. So we're learning new things right now, aren't we? That's all I have.
It's going to be a new world on the backside of this for sure. I think I was talking with a recent a developer who is projecting that with the new era of teleconferencing and the amount of people that are able to do their jobs from home, that there's going to be it's going to be an interesting landscape from a office space availability once we get on the backside of this, and Portland could be seeing a shift in terms of what that will look like in the downtown core from development and from office space. So again, something to look at and keep in mind moving forward. So thank you all. Appreciate that. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda. We've got two items that are a part of that.
Mr. Mayor, I move for passage of the consent agenda, which includes the approval of the minutes of the March 4th, 2020 City Council work session and regular meeting, and the appointment of Melody Thompson to the Canby Utility Board.
Second.
Was that you?
Second that.
Thank you, Councilor Hensley. The motion's been made by Council President Dale and seconded by Councilor Hensley to approve the consent agenda, which include the approval of the minutes of the March 4th, 2020 City Council work session and regular meeting, and appointment of Melody Thompson to the Canby Utility Board. Any other discussion or conversation on that? Seeing head shaking no. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Councilor Parker?
I heard him say aye.
Yes.
Okay. Anyone opposed? Okay. It looks like that passes 6-0. Next on the agenda, we're going to move into resolutions. The first one up is resolution number 1330. Resolution authorizing Columbia Distributing Strategic Investment Zone application and authorizing the city administrator to enter into a contract with Columbia Distributing. I will turn that over to Amanda.
Well, actually, I guess I'll sit in. This is Joe Lindsay, city attorney. And I thought I would present, and that this has actually been presented a couple of times to you guys over the last few meetings. In fact, the consent agenda that you just approved had the minutes regarding the March 4th informational workshop, where there was a lot of information, and it's in the packet for anybody who's listening out there. But it included a lot of the discussion perhaps that you'll hear tonight, and that I'll try to spare you in the initial presentation here. The crux of 1330 is that for better or worse, I think it's probably not the best wording in a resolution, to be quite honest. And so I'm coming to you tonight to somewhat apologize for the wording of it, because of what it really doesn't say, or what it's not supposed to do. The wording of the resolution currently says it's authorizing Columbia Distributing Strategic Investment Zone application. And as I've said to folks, I think that's kind of a mischaracterization of what 1330 really does, and the only action that the city actually really needs to take, which is deciding whether or not they want to enter into the contract that is attached to 1330, which is an agreement in accordance with the strategic investment zone with Clackamas County, and it's an agreement between Clackamas County, the city, and then of course Columbia Distributing. And so the reason I wanted to bring that up and kind of clarify and even apologize for the awkward wording originally is because I think it's led down the road to us at times arguing about whether or not your action authorizes them to have this as part of our strategic investment zone. And the short answer is that this isn't authorizing them to do it. What it does is it actually authorizes the county to then present their application, Columbia's application, to Business Oregon. And where you'll find the answer to that is in ORS 285C 609, which is titled Request by County. And that's kind of important to realize that that statute really is that the county is set up to have the strategic investment zone for both the urban and the rural, and that it is their job to take it forward to Business Oregon. And our part in that is the sub 4 part, where we are, in order for the county to go forward, they have to have this agreement in place about how the community service fee will be enforced if they're found eligible by Business Oregon. So I wanted to make sure and point that out because I just don't, I would be remiss if people got hung up on the wording of the resolution when what's really happening, or what you could even choose to do is just excise that first action point in the resolution itself under now therefore it's resolved. You could agree to amend it to just say the number one could be scratched out. The application of Columbia Distributing for the Strategic Investment Zone is authorized, because really that's unnecessary. And in fact, they wouldn't be authorized by that. They would have to go forward by county request. Even with this agreement in place, their application would have to be requested by the county to go to Business Oregon, and then Business Oregon would have the final say in whether they're eligible or not. So, and my understanding is, one of the last meetings that the county had, they actually went ahead and unanimously authorized this agreement with us already by their consent agenda. And so they're waiting for us to authorize our part of it as part of the strategic investment zone. And then from there, they will take it forward to Business Oregon. And then Business Oregon, who actually is represented by the Department of Justice, or the Department of Justice represents them legally. That's how you're going to get the legal determination in a staff report at their meeting of whether or not they think that this is eligible and the legality behind that. So it really isn't a question of us deciding that. And so I just wanted to make that clear moving forward. And with that, I'm hopeful that your questions won't be too many or too much, but at the same time, we do have Jamie Stickle here, our Economic Development Director, as well as we've asked that Cindy Moore, the county counterpart to that, to be available by phone if need be, as well as Lynn Longfellow, who is part of the tax assessor's office up there at the county. So we would like to be able to address any questions you have, but with that, I will just, I guess, beg your mercy for not wording this better to begin with.
No, Joe, so again, just as a recap for the viewing audience and this had been brought to us. We tabled it because we had a lot of questions and we had a lot of pieces that we wanted to do and get a better understanding of the work that we had. Just a month ago. I mean, we went kind of top to bottom on this whole conversation, and we've had still more conversation and questions come up. So where we're at, Joe, is like as you're trying to explain to us here, based on what I'm looking at in terms of it's not really the city administrator moving into an agreement as much as it's just approving this to move on county for them to approve and move on to Business Oregon. Is that correct?
Technically, it's the city being a part of an agreement with the county and the distributing company. In the event that they're held eligible, the agreement then would become the way in which we force them to either pay the community service fee or have to pay all the taxes. And so the way the statute's written, this agreement has to be part of their application that then Business Oregon will deem it eligible, or deem it, I guess, complete enough that they can then determine the eligibility of it.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Parker, you're waving your hand first. No question? Okay. Councilor Berge?
Yeah, I just, in regards to the letters we've received from the Canby Fire Department, as well as from several other citizens, I just kind of wanted to clarify what Joe was saying a little bit more and talk about a couple of little things that a lot of people have been asking that really doesn't affect us here. We're not here tonight to make a decision on whether the timing of the application made it eligible or ineligible. That will be up to Business Oregon. We're not here to make a decision on how the new tax funds or even the community service fees will be distributed. Resolution 1330 is simply a tool that we have in our toolbox that allows us the opportunity to bring in revenue into the city. And this size will bring approximately $465,000 in revenue that we would not be receiving if it wasn't for this. In 15 years, that amount's going to be a lot, considerably larger, and we'll be reaping the benefits of the long game at that point. Tonight is simply a formality in the process that we are, as a city, we have already agreed to. We're not only making sure that this agreement is solidified to hold the applicant accountable for the community service fee, but we're also, or if they're deemed eligible by Business Oregon, that's all that we're doing here tonight. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Thank you, Councilor Berge. Councilor Parker?
Well, I'm not sure what we're voting on. It sounds like our city attorney just said, these are not the droids we're looking at. To ignore the language of what's in our packet, that's the wrong language, that we should be voting on some other language?
Would you like me to answer?
I'd like to know what we're doing here tonight. I thought that we were here to vote on the resolution that was in the packet. That was the resolution that I researched. That was the resolution that I was prepared to vote on tonight.
Well, what I'm saying is, we've left the resolution the same due to the fact that it was set over. We had to bring exactly the same resolution, but because of the kind of certain amount of consternation that this resolution seemed to create, in part, I just didn't want the verbiage of the resolution to be further confusing. And so this has really become one of the first moments where I could speak to you and say, look, the resolution itself, what we need to do in order to fulfill our portion of the strategic investment zone is simply to put forward the agreement with the county and with, it's called in colloquial terms, it's called the community service fee agreement. We just need to put that forward. We don't actually have to approve the application. And so I just wanted to make that clear, because it seems as if in a lot of these conversations and even outside conversations that folks have had in the community, the buck kind of stops with people saying, well, if they're not eligible, how can you do this? This isn't us deciding eligibility. It's us deciding whether or not we're going to do our part that when we sign up for the strategic investment zone and send the standardized application forward. So I'm saying, if you want, and you can always do this, you can always amend the resolution as long as everybody agrees or makes a motion for amending it. If you want to take out the language that seems to be confusing, you could take out the number one operative action point down near the bottom of the resolution. There's two things that this resolution reports to do. One is the application of Columbia Distributing for the strategic investment zone is authorized, and number two is the city administrator is authorized to enter into an agreement with the city of Canby, Clackamas County, and Columbia Distributing that demonstrates the investment and adheres to the strategic investment zone guidelines. I'm saying, for clarity, if you want, you can even amend it and take out that you're not even authorizing this application, that simply you're sending forward the agreement so that Business Oregon can then determine the eligibility. And that's all I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to change the resolution as much as offer the idea that you can amend it to just take out the part that isn't even legally necessary.
And what I'm saying is that I want completed staff work being presented to the council. And when this first came to the council, this was the language, this was what we were asked to vote on. And now it sounds like we're supposed to be voting on something else. I would ask the mayor as a point of order on this, that there even comes a point here in terms of the agenda that this was noticed as being the language that we were going to discuss. 1. 2, a committee is not a great place to start doing amendments and to recraft language. I would much rather have the staff go back, bring us completed staff work. And it sounds like you have some language for us, but this is not the appropriate forum for us to be recrafting it. And I was not prepared to discuss, debate, and vote on different language. I was prepared to do those things with the language that was in the agenda.
Well,
You
then,
understand that?
and no motion has been made, you can still vote on Resolution 1330 as it stands.
Councilor Spoon?
Yeah, my question is in regards to that. It seemed to me when I read the original SIZ agreement that we went into with Clackamas County to create the SIZ, that there was an approval process built in, and that process required us to authorize the application. The document that actually creates the SIZ, there was a process written into that document. So whether or not it's enforceable or whatever is another question, but I recall reading the original SIZ contract and that being part of the process. Am I not correct about that?
Well,
I mean, it's been a month since I read it, but.
I'm giving advice from, for one, what discussions with a DOJ attorney as well as just the plain reading of 285C 609. The thing is, if you guys want to approve Resolution 1330 as is, that is fine too. The language itself isn't, if it doesn't actually perform an action that's necessary for the statute, it isn't running afoul of the statute necessarily. And so I was trying to remove confusion. Perhaps when attorneys speak, that, you know, there's a danger of actually adding more confusion, but you can either pass it as 1330 right now, the way it is, or the other option I was giving you is to take out the number 1.
Right, but my question is the original contract that actually creates the SIZ has a legal process in it that our city agreed to follow, right? And I think that process included authorizing the application. So to me, if the contract that we agreed to begin with that created the SIZ has a process in it, that's the one we should follow.
I'll reiterate that I'm going by discussions I've had as well as what the Oregon State statute is, the 2017 version of it. And like I said, if you guys want to vote on 1330 as it is, I'm plenty fine with that. It will stand legal muster as well.
So Joe, just as it, so I think we got convoluted here with getting into the conversation about the motion and what it is that the verbiage is. So let's rewind. We don't have that conversation about changing the motion. The spirit and the intent and all the dialogue that we have had now for 2 months on this is it all with all the pieces to what we've been talking about?
Yes, the important piece as far as the city's participation in this is that there has been a SIZ application come forward, and our portion of it is simply to approve the agreement between the county, that's called the Community Service Fee Agreement, between the county, us, and the applicant. In the event that they're deemed eligible, it will become actionable. But it isn't the eligibility question. It's simply whether or not we're going to participate like we said we would when we do this process, and usher forward this agreement as part of the application.
Counselor Berge?
Joe, from everything that I've researched on this, and I've spent quite a bit of time now trying to dig in to understand this, everything I'm seeing is that it's not up to us to figure out eligibility. It's not up to us to figure out any of whether, even if we were to vote it down tonight, it's already been approved at the county. And so the next step is Business Oregon would then be able to determine the eligibility, and all that we're doing tonight, it's a formality in order to ensure that we're solidifying the applicant and holding them accountable to the community service fees as long as they're deemed eligible by Business Oregon down the road. Is that correct?
Well, it's correct in that this agreement is only effective if they are deemed eligible. So it does protect us in the event that Business Oregon thinks that they're eligible. The portion of our participation in this is that the strategic investment zone was created and codified in Oregon's revised statute 285C 600 et al. And in that, it says that the county is the one who always brings these forward, but the county has an obligation to get the agreement with us, this community service fee agreement with us as part of the application process to move forward to package it up and then ask Business Oregon if the business that's asking for it is eligible or not. So this is an important part that the city and the county are teaming up together to make sure that it's in place so that Business Oregon can then do their part, which is determine eligibility.
And the county, you said, has already voted unanimously to approve.
Yes.
So regardless of what we do tonight, we would just be dragging our feet, because in the end, it comes down to the Business Oregon next, figuring out whether it's eligible or not eligible.
Yeah,
But it doesn't go to Business Oregon until it comes through us. That's the process.
Yes, our decision tonight is to allow it to go forward by statute as having this side agreement. But the side agreement doesn't say whether they're eligible or not. It's not a vote to say yay or nay on their eligibility. It is simply an agreement that is codified in statute that has to be part of that application package. And so it's really us trying not to stand in their way of getting the eligibility question answered.
Joe, can you tell me if we don't approve this tonight, does it still go to Business Oregon, or does it stop?
Well, it says under the statute.
What is the next step if this is approved tonight?
Well, what happens is if the county doesn't get the city to have this agreement with them ahead of it going to Business Oregon, then Business Oregon won't look at it because they won't deem it complete. So the problem is we're sitting out here 10 years ago becoming an active portion of the SIZ and basically inviting applicants to be part of this program. And our only initial part of this is as part of the participation, basically a promise that we would agree to doing these standardized agreements with applicants so that they could have their eligibility question answered for them at Business Oregon. And that is, I guess, part of when you have a strategic investment zone as opposed to the strategic investment program, which is a statewide program already. The zone was supposed to be streamlined because these agreements were supposed to have kind of a standardization that meant that cities within the strategic investment zone knew basically what the agreements were going to be. That's the word standardized, that they're all standard. And so there didn't have to be horse trading at the front end of these of this application process, which was supposed to make it more streamlined. I hope that answers your question.
So Joe, I'm sorry, there were, the original question Sean asked, if we don't approve it tonight, it does not move to Business Oregon, correct?
The county, according to the statute, the county has to have this agreement with us in order for them to ask Business Oregon to see whether it's eligible or not. So, I mean, that's an affirmative answer, but it's a specific answer because the statute doesn't answer in the negative. It only presupposes that the county and the city will come to an agreement. It doesn't foresee that a city is going to be arguing with the county over what the standardized agreement is.
Councilor Parker?
Joe, I think I'm hearing something from you I've not heard before. And let me use the device of exaggerating a point to make it. Am I hearing you that it's not our job to take a look at the application and see if it's filled out correctly?
It is not our job to determine eligibility.
I'm not, no, Joe, I'm not asking that. Is it our job to see that the application is filled out correctly? If they got the name wrong, if they got the location of the business wrong, if they put incorrect information, is it our job to see that the application was filled out correctly? I understand what you're saying about eligibility being the role of Business Oregon. Mm-hmm. But if a company would come in and say their building was $24 million and they turn us in the application, are you advising us that we should go ahead and pass it anyway? That what's on the application doesn't matter?
Here's the long and the short of this is we are not the enforcement mechanism for taxes in this situation, and it really comes down to the taxes. So we're not going to send police investigators out to see what the value of something is. The thing is, this is an obvious one because they're well above 25 million. I think obviously we're, as a city, we're kind of the boots on the ground in terms of if somebody was a total sham and they had a ice cream shack out in the middle of the field and they were trying to pass one of these, I think it would be a no-brainer and we would say no. But the fact is...
So we are in charge of setting a criteria by which the information on the form is correct.
I think there has to be a plain, kind of obvious sniff test.
Okay.
But as far as true legal eligibility.
All right. And I've already broken my promise to the mayor. I said I'd only speak 30 seconds. Let me finish it up. 4 words. Didn't apply in time.
Any other questions for Joe?
So Joe, for like the umpteenth recap for you, I know. What I understand my attorney telling me is he's suggesting verbiage on the resolution that clarifies the proper legal intent and is compliant with the statute. That is to say, by removing number 1, we are clarifying that we don't determine eligibility of the application. Instead, what we're really doing is entering into the agreement for the Community Service Fund, and by doing so, that in effect forwards the application on, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So, Mr. Mayor, just a suggestion to tackle this in 2 pieces. We can do it in the order that everyone pleases or you please. One part is to get clarity on the language. so that it's good language that everybody understands and agrees what we're doing. Although Joe says it can legally stand a test as it is. The second part is, now that we've got clarity on the resolution, what we're going to read and vote on, we put it aside and then we discuss the merits of approving the resolution. Makes sense? Two different pieces. One's language, one is what are we going to do with it?
I still have concern that the original SIZ contract requires us to approve the to authorize the application. I hear what Joe's saying about Business Oregon not thinking it's required, but the SIZ is between us and the county, and Business Oregon isn't even a party to that agreement. And in my reading of the original SIZ agreement that we made 10 years ago, that was the process. And it's important to me that that's the contract we agreed to, and that's the one I feel beholden to as part of what our process is. I understand that Business Oregon may have a different process or not see it, but Business Oregon isn't party to that agreement.
Joe, comment on that?
Oh, well, I mean, there's different takes on this. I know there's even been opinion at Business Oregon that we wouldn't necessarily have to vote on it at all and that it's a standardized agreement. I don't necessarily agree with going that far, because I think anytime you guys have an IGA, an intergovernmental agreement between governments, that you guys should have a say in it. And I do think that the statute, the one I've referenced a couple of times tonight, the 285C609, calls for them to have this agreement with the city. And I think that is maybe because this was a 10-year-old, strategic investment zone. And so I think every administration and every council wants the, option of having not only transparency, but being educated on exactly what the law is of the land and what they're in for. So I don't see this as a fruitless exercise whatsoever. So my opinion still remains that I think you guys should vote at least for the agreement to go forward in order for this to be a legitimate bona fide thing.
Thank you. So Tim, you've put forward breaking this down, right? So, and that's why I asked a clarifying question. Is we're looking at in terms of what's been in front of us, the conversations that we have had, that hasn't changed. But what Joe has recommended, or the conversation piece at the beginning of this conversation, was that it's not the city administrator entering into an agreement, it's the city of Canby entering into a strategic investment standard. Is that what I'm hearing from a language standpoint that you were trying to convey?
That, are you asking me?
Yes, I'm asking you.
Okay, yeah, that portion of number 2 is actually also a little in error, in that it isn't the city administrator authorized or necessary for the city administrator to authorize it, as much as just it's going to be an agreement. So if you guys are if you just authorize the agreement, it doesn't mean that the city administrator has to be a part of it. Oftentimes your contracting agent, the city administrator is the one who you guys give authority to go forward. Again, that might clean it up. It wouldn't be fatal either way.
Okay, I think I get that. Okay. So as we were talking, if we look at it, so the motion becomes more of the motion is to approve that the city of Canby
You broke up Brian, you broke up for me. I didn't hear any of that
Sorry.
part.
So, sorry, I was trying to rewrite looking at the language piece. Am I still breaking up, Sarah? Okay. So what I wrote down based on the conversation of language was that the city council approved the city Miss County.
Sound like a robot again.
Can you guys hear me now? Is that better? Okay. So as we were talking in terms of what Tim had commented about breaking it up into two parts. So if I look at the language piece that Joe, going back at the beginning of the conversation, was that to take apart the city or remove the city administrator piece as the agreement party, that it becomes the city. So we're looking to approve that the city of Canby to enter into the strategic investment zone standardized agreement with Clackamas County.
That's great.
That's what I'm hearing in terms of the language piece. So part one to Tim's breaking it apart piece. Part two is the merits of that resolution doesn't change because of it's the same information doing the same thing as what was presented and we carried over as a resolution. Is that correct? Am I wrapping my mind around that, Tim and Joe?
Yeah, well, Tim's shaking his head, and for the listeners, and yeah, this, I mean, we're bringing a resolution to you that will work. The cleaner version would be to remove the city administrator out of it, and you can decide whether or not you want the application to be authorized or not.
Joe, for me, can you confirm what the original SIZ agreement said the process was?
Well, if you want to hold true with it, I would say just leave it as the application is authorized for your vote, because that'll cover it. I don't have it right here in front of me.
And it's been a couple of weeks since I read it because I didn't know we were going to have this conversation. So I was looking for it in my email, but I don't see it.
Well, and so I will say, if you please leave it in then, and just, you could take out the city administrator authorization if you want, or you can leave it completely as is. I just was trying to be less confusing, and again, I guess I was trying to fall on my sword and say I was confusing before, and I guess I'm more confusing now, so my apologies again.
Councilor Parker?
Well, this does get me back, Joe, to a question that I asked during our work session, which is, how do we explain this to citizens? What are we doing tonight?
Tonight, you are very simply, there's an application that has come in that is part of the strategic investment zone that was established 10 years ago for businesses that are, we're a rural strategic investment zone, and so businesses that are eligible, at least, or what look like they're eligible, meaning they're over $25 million in a traded sector and are doing new construction, can apply for this, but the eligibility question of whether or not they're going to receive a tax break on it is codified in statute as only answerable by the Oregon Business Development Commission, but the avenue for which these applications come in requires that the county ask Business Oregon to deem their eligibility or not, but the county cannot ask that unless, if there's a city involved, they have this other agreement in place with the city that says if they are deemed eligible, there's this community service fee portion, and it basically is a standardized agreement between the county, the city, and the company, which says if they are eligible and they have to pay this community service fee, these are the penalties. If they don't, they'll owe all the taxes in full. So it really is this, it's what they call pro forma, or part of the form of the application, the process in which to ask Business Oregon whether they're eligible or not. necessitates having this agreement in place between the city, the county, and Business Oregon so that everybody knows if they're deemed eligible, that there are penalties for not paying the community service fee. And so those are laid out in this standardized agreement.
And you think I'm going to be able to remember that at the coffee bar at Thriftway when somebody asked me, what did you do Wednesday night?
Well, I guess, and I'm remiss or loath to give advice on how to do the elevator speech, but the elevator speech on this one.
I'm asking staff to help me out here.
Okay.
Because part of my job is to be able to explain what we did tonight.
Okay.
And I don't have a way of, I mean, I was almost there with 1330 on what we were going to be voting on. And again, why weren't we originally presented with the information we're given tonight back then? I don't know. But in any case, my job as a city councilor is to explain to people what we're doing. And I can't even repeat back what you just said. And I don't think any of us would be able to repeat back. I mean, that was 45, 60 seconds worth of explanation. And I don't think I could get it straight. I don't think I could explain what we're doing tonight.
Well, let me try harder. If it were me and I met you in the elevator and I said, Mr. Parker, I need your vote, I would say, Mr. Parker, it's not about what you are doing in this agreement, it's what you're not doing. You're not saying they're eligible at all. All you're doing is basically your part to send a complete application forward to a different agency that will determine it. I hope that helps.
Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, but wouldn't the easiest thing to say is that you're holding the applicant accountable for the community service fee if they're deemed eligible by Business Oregon?
That's beautiful. You're better than at this than I am, so well done.
You know, Joe, I think in my elevator speech, I would just cut to the heart of the matter. That if we do pass this, what we're really telling people is, yes, we approved an agreement that has been longstanding for a decade that will grant a very sizable tax abatement to Columbia Distributing. Yes, we will not get all the tax money that we would have otherwise. There are some offsets in terms of the community service fee, but it will not be as much. In exchange, we've attracted a very large employer, what will eventually provide a sizable increase to the tax base. And that's the decision we made. That's if we pass it. I wouldn't get hung up on the application at all. I just go to the heart of what it really does.
Okay.
Does that sound right?
It does.
Greg, did you have something else?
I was waiting to be recognized.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Well, Tim points it out that if we're going to go back to the original agreement, that there are 4 benefits that come to a community for engaging in this process. And one of them is the establishment of an office in the county that works with the applicant to make sure that there is a good faith effort for contracting to local businesses. That cannot happen when the building's already built. You know, that's part of the absurdity. And I think the community kind of sees that, is that how can we benefit once the building's already built? Part of the way that this was presented to the council in July of 2010 was that there are 4 benefits. And one of them was a mechanism to encourage the use of local contractors. 25% of the benefits of this program aren't able to be recognized because the building's already been built. So I wasn't even gonna go there, but Tim, you raised the fact of what's the original agreement in 2010? It's that the county will establish an office to work with the company to get local contractors. Our representative from the county at our work session said that office won't be set up until after the process has been approved, which means long after the building's been built. We're going to set up a process to do something that isn't going to need to be done.
Other questions or comments for Joe? I know Jamie, I think Jamie's either on the phone or in the audience there. We have questions for her. Joe, I typed into into the chat there for you to look at as a proposed motion. Did you want to take a look at that before I put it out to the group? That's suitable. Basically, as I move to approve the authorization of the city of Canby to enter into the strategic and investment zone standardized agreement with Clackamas County.
Hold on for just one moment. Oh, are we good? Oh, okay. There was an alarm going off in the background. I was trying to look at your chat. I approve the authorization of the city of Canby to enter into, yeah. I mean, that can be it. I want to pay credence to the fact that that will be number 2, and that I think I hear Councilor Spoon reiterating more than once that she wants number 1 to remain in there, and I will defer to you guys on whether number 1 stays in or not.
I think if we have to separate them and vote on them each separately, I'm comfortable with that, but I recall requiring us to authorize the application as part of the process. And if you want them to be separate items instead of part of one item, I'm okay with that, but I'm not really okay having a resolution for 2 months now that we've all been researching, noticing it to the public, having that conversation, and then in the meeting saying, never mind, the process that we established 10 years ago no longer matters, we're only going to vote on a part of it. I mean, we've been having this conversation for 2 months now on the resolution as it is.
And I'm okay with, I mean, because what I'm reading here is that in the motion, the proposed motion for tonight being, I guess, what's here in the packet, right? I moved to, on page 18, at the bottom of 18, I move to approve authorization of the interim city administrator to enter into the strategic investment zone standardized agreement with Columbia Distributing and Clackamas County. That's the proposed motion. And I mean, I'm fine with leaving that as is, since that's what we've been talking about for 2 months.
And that's fine, legally fine.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I propose to approve authorization of the interim city administrator to enter into the strategic investment zone standardized agreement with Columbia Distributing and Clackamas County.
I second.
Sorry.
I second.
Thank you. Thank you, councilors. All right, motion's been made by Councilor Berge and seconded by Councilor Hensley. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I just want to point out now is the time for continued debate and discussion on the matter, like the mayor has called for. Joe, I expressed it, unfortunately, a little emotionally to our assessor's office. I'm deeply troubled by 2 things in this. I'll say first off that the application deadline, it's not a big hang up for me. Looking through the record, I think they expressed intent to partake in the SIZ. I'm happy to let Business Oregon deal with the deadline portion. The two things that really bother me is this is just a really horrible piece of legislation, how it's been written. It's extremely confusing. What's offensive to me is that not all the taxing districts are represented as part of the application process. So in particular, the Clackamas Community College, Canby School District, and Canby Fire are not participants except through us in the county. To me, that seems grossly unfair. That being what it is, we have to deal with the cards that were dealt on this. The other thing, Joe, that I'm interested in your comment on is I do share Councilor Parker's deep disappointment at the missed opportunity to use local contractors. That is, you can't stuff toothpaste back in the tube, right? We can't unwind the clock on that. Is there a way for us to express our grievance about that to Business Oregon as part of their approval process, should we approve this motion?
Certainly. You can, for one, the eligibility question really is not being answered tonight, and they could hear all of these arguments anew, and I assume that certain agencies will go up and actually vehemently argue them at their meeting, which I believe was reset. It was tentatively set for April 10th. I believe it's reset to mid-May now. But so those statements could even be told to them while they're determining eligibility for this particular applicant. But yes, there's a couple of ways to answer this. One is getting local first source applicants for the position or for the contracting and such like that for a building like this. I believe that in this instance, it happened to be locals did apply as part of their process, and I think regionals actually got it. And it all depends on what your definition of local and regionals are. But I know that certain local folks applied to be some of the contracting on the building, and if you look at the list of contractors, I believe that was part of information that was out there. I know several of them you could either categorize as either local or regional because they're either Portland-based or Southern Washington or whatever. So there are different ways of looking at that, but I think if you wanted just hyper-localized, as in just county, that could be a message you could easily send to Business Oregon as well.
Another thought, okay, that's good to hear, Joe. I do think we should express our displeasure with that. I don't know if Business Oregon has the statutory ability to adjust their approval or adjust the taxation. From my reading, I don't see that, but I don't claim to understand it fully. The other significant issue, of course, is Canby Fire's concern about loss of taxation, tax funding on it. If we look at the tax assessor's estimate, it looks to be roughly $39,000 in the first year. Should we approve this motion, I do want to let the rest of the council know I would support in the community service funds negotiation, just looking at things on a prorated basis by district, which I assume is the default that Business Oregon would do if we did not come to an agreement. I would support the city's portion, prorated portion, being given to Canby Fire. And I would also support the council urging the county to devote its portion as well. If both of us were willing to do that, the math says that Canby Fire would be made whole in terms of any abated revenue. So that's a thought. The math for that was done roughly on a napkin, and the mayor was warned that I might say that. But that is a thought I have for how to help our local sister agency deal with the biggest grievance financially.
And I guess as a matter of process, I will say, and just for the listening audience too, to reiterate, this action that you're taking tonight really only puts them then in front of Business Oregon, so that Business Oregon will determine whether they're eligible or not at their next meeting, which I understand is in mid-May now. And at that meeting, if Business Oregon deems them eligible, and I don't know what part of this will be deemed eligible or not, but whatever their answer is there, then the 90-day clock starts ticking on a third agreement, which is, or what's in the nomenclature called a third agreement, but it's our second agreement, which is with the other taxing districts. And you're right, at that time, you can all decide what the negotiation is and how you want to have that divvied up between the taxing districts, as long as 75% of the taxing districts approve it.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Thank you, Tim. Counselor Spoon?
Yeah, I have a question. I found the original SIZ agreement, Joe.
Yeah.
And in Exhibit B, I know that you said that there was not, that all eligibility was up to Business Oregon, but I'm looking at Exhibit B of the original SIZ agreement. And it says, hold on, I just lost it. Here it is. Companies, and this is eligible companies must meet the following local requirements in addition to any Oregon requirements. This is part of our original SIZ agreement with the county. And so that's what the top of Exhibit B, and in it, it says companies must sign a first source contracting agreement committing them to consider qualified or local contractors first for SIZ related investments, including construction, ongoing operations, and professional services. So maybe we need to delay this to figure out, it looks like there is a local eligibility requirement related to something they didn't do.
Well, and I will reiterate that the eligibility question is still Business Oregon's.
But the SIZ says, in addition to Oregon's, there are local eligibility requirements, and that includes them using the first source contracting agreement for construction of the investment.
Well, and so I guess the question is, and if they're the ones who are deeming it eligible or ineligible and the county's taking it to them, I guess our argument could be if you feel strongly as a full panel that those requirements of eligibility are not being adhered to, then you could present that to Business Oregon.
Well, right. So my question is, the way it's worded in the SIZ that was agreed to 10 years ago is they must meet the following local requirements in addition to any Oregon requirements. So wouldn't that mean that as part of this process, we're agreeing that they met the local requirements? Because the SIZ, Business Oregon is not party to the SIZ agreement. Business Oregon has the CIP. The SIZ is an agreement between Clackamas County and Canby. And so there's different eligibility requirements. So if we're saying, like, it's Business Oregon's job to determine if the project qualifies for basically in a bigger scope, but they're not party to the SIZ agreement at all. So isn't it our obligation to determine if they met the requirements of the SIZ, the local SIZ? Because it says, I mean, the SIZ agreement we signed 10 years ago says there are local requirements of eligibility in addition to the state of Oregon's. So Business Oregon is going to deal with the state requirements. Isn't it our job as a city council to determine if they meet the local requirements that we have in our individual SIZ?
Well, I would say that it's both I would say the county is the one who's supposed to carry this to the Business Oregon.
But it doesn't say that. It just says,
it
says it's a local requirement.
Okay, but I'll read to you from the statute that sets up the strategic investment zone. This is the ORS for strategic investment zone, and they say that it's the request has to be by the county. So I'm trying to answer you legally that it's the county that carries this up to Business Oregon and asks them if they're eligible or not. So, I mean, it's up to the county to make the request. So my legal answer is that eligibility, if the county is asking Business Oregon to do so, that if you want to have a discussion with the county about what their request is of Business Oregon, as a body, you can.
Sarah, you're shaking your head.
No, I mean, I understand what Joe's saying, but to me, there's a legal difference between Business Oregon's obligation in terms of the state program and the individual agreement we have. The individual agreement we have it basically says they have to meet the local requirements. I'm saying I don't think they meet our local requirements, and those are separate from the state's requirements. The SIZ agreement says that they have to have the first source contracting agreement for the construction of the investment, and they didn't have that. The county told us in our work session they haven't signed it yet because they don't have to. So to me, we have this local requirement. The whole point of the SIZ is that it's supposed to be a win-win. It's supposed to be a win for the business because they have an incentive to come to the community, then the community attracts an investment, but also they get the first source hiring and the first source contracting. And if they aren't holding up that end of the bargain as is lined out in the SIZ agreement, that is the local requirement, to me, it's just having them apply after the construction started is a backdoor way for the corporation to get their cake and eat it too. They don't have to make it a win-win. It's a win-meh, and it's supposed to be a win-win. And if it's a local requirement, I think we have an obligation to look into that more. That's what the SIZ agreement says. If Business Oregon isn't meeting until May, I'm not going to agree to it tonight until we look into that further. Like, originally we were supposed to deal with it tonight because Business Oregon was meeting April 10th, but now they're not doing that. So why would we rush a decision on what the local eligibility determination is?
Does it enumerate there, Sarah, in what you're reading, what is considered local? I mean, is that?
It doesn't. It just says it's a local requirement. So it doesn't say it belongs to the county. It says eligible companies must meet the following local requirements in addition to any Oregon requirements of the SIZ program. And then in the third part of that, it says they must sign the first source contracting agreement, committing themselves to consider qualified local or county contractors first for SIZ related investments, including construction, ongoing operations, and professional services. So it specifies that they have to have that agreement for the original construction. So
if I'm putting on, and again, not a very good lawyer hat because I'm not a lawyer, but if I'm word parsing this out, the word consider jumps out at me. So,
but it says they have to sign. It says they have to sign the agreement, and then as part of that, they consider, and they didn't sign the agreement.
The agreement.
The first source contracting. The county told us in the work session they haven't signed it yet because they haven't asked them to.
Interesting.
But the SIZ agreement says that they have to sign it and use it for construction of the investment, and they didn't do that. And that's a local requirement in addition to the Oregon state requirements.
So under the first source contracting, that doesn't mean that they have to use anybody local.
No, I understand that.
They have to go through what is called a GFE, or a good faith effort.
Yeah, I understand that, but they didn't sign that agreement and they weren't beholden to it. I understand what the agreement is. I'm saying they didn't sign it and they didn't execute it, and that the SIZ contract says that's a requirement of local eligibility for the construction of the investment.
All right. Thank you, Councilor Spoon. Councilor Dale.
So there's still the 800-pound gorilla in the room, right? In the end, it comes down to some fundamental issues to decide on. The big ugly one is, how do we feel about tax abatement as a break for such big projects? And there's ways we can react to this motion, right? We can say, look, we want to study it some more. We'll tackle it at the next city council meeting in 2 weeks. We'll let our attorney talk to the county's attorney, whatever. We can say, no, you blew the application. You were late. We're pissed that you didn't sign the local agreement. Some could call that technicalities. could also be viewed as, hey, it was a huge loss of opportunity for local contractors. I'm not sure how we get through the legal definitions that are around that. Another is we can say, look, we agreed to join into this 10 years ago. We're going to pass on your application, and we're going to go to Business Oregon, and we're going to really take it to you there. But in the end, I feel kind of like we're dancing around the fundamental issue of how do we feel about this. For myself, I think we've been dealt a tough hand, right? We've got some discrepancies in the application process. This was something entered into by a city council a decade ago. You often hear me say that city councils are only bound by previous city councils to the extent of contracts and indebtedness. Joe has mentioned this has somewhat of a contract feel to it. I'm waiting for him to also counsel us on the hazards of moving the goalpost after the game has started. And I would like to hear from Joe his legal opinion on what if we say no. But I don't want us to dance around a core issue that I hear simmering. And that is, do we fundamentally agree with this as a tool or not? We'll have to make a decision on the Columbia case. As Councilor Parker brought up last time, if we don't think this is a good tool, then we need to deal with that as to whether we're going to continue to honor that or if we're going to withdraw from that agreement. We do have interested parties in the pipeline who have expressed an interest in using the SIZ. And we need to make that clear, and there's some ramifications to that if we say we're going to withdraw from that agreement. That will get out, opportunities may be lost, and as unfortunately we've learned in the last few weeks, our economy's taken a big change, and we may find ourselves back into a counter-recessionary environment that this tool was meant to help with, although it was written really poorly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Oh, and I want to say, I think it changes the complexion of the discussion a bit if we say, if we can make the fire department whole, how do we feel about this, both in this case and as a tool?
Well, to me, I think the fire district piece comes in the next phase of the conversation in terms of what is that, when we look at the community fee or whatever, when that conversation comes about, that to me is where that conversation occurs. This is, to your point, are we at that state, we're at that point of, okay, move it forward and, or not. But if it moves forward and Business Oregon says, hey, it's flawed or whatever, other entities go and make their case or plead their argument to Business Oregon, we tack on whatever we tack onto it, the Councilor Spoon's point of, do they truly sign on to the lack of them signing on to hiring locally, or, defining that piece, or that needs to be defined and called out, that gets all handled there. Then that's tonight. Then we've got to then decide, is this a tool that we want to use or even retain in our toolbox? Councilor Varwick?
Yeah, I am in agreement with a lot of what Tim has said, and I really do think that if we do approve this tonight, I think that we bring ourselves another responsibility of making sure that we stay on top of it and fight for the other taxing districts as well. Canby Fire, some of the others that might, if we can bring them whole, I think that would be great with that community service fee. So I think to make sure that we're kind of on the same page, that we don't just kick this to somebody else, and that we stay on top of this and we maintain our responsibility to our community partners as well when the time comes.
Councilor Hensley?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I understand it, we're just deciding tonight if we're going to move this on to Business Oregon. I understand that talking about the taxing districts, Canby Fire, all of how all this stuff is going to shake out is an important conversation, but that really isn't discussion for the motion on the table. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Okay, then I call for the question.
I
So
would point
question-
out that,
Go ahead, Tim.
I would point out that we have not, for the public record, heard Joe's legal advice. Should we fail this motion? We have had correspondence with him, but not in the sunshine.
Well, and so I guess I'm in an awkward position in that I try to advise you guys fully, but not always in the sunshine, because sometimes when we advise people about certain ramifications, it might wave flags at people on how to defeat us. And without knowing what your entire vote is, I want to be able to keep in your toolbox arguments that might go either way. But that said, I will say this: if you have signed up for to be a part of something that promises at least if a good faith effort comes forward and some detrimental reliance is done on the part of a party, there is always some exposure if then you move the goalposts, as you mentioned, or change the rules, or come up with kind of a last-minute reason why you're not going to participate in the process. So there is liability. I won't. I'll go that far and say that you're right. This is a sort of a social or advertised, somewhat contractual offer out there for businesses to potentially use as a toolbox. It isn't a foregone conclusion that when somebody asks to be an applicant that they will be deemed eligible. That is, and I will consistently say, that is the province under the statute of Business Oregon. So it isn't that the city of Canby promised, if you come, we will make sure you're eligible. That never, ever happened. So I'm not going to say I'm not going to put a value of liability on that. But what I am going to say is if you have a program and you say that this is a standardized program and this is how it works, and you invite people to come in and at least try to participate in that program, then the ongoing assumption, especially if money is spent on the way towards that you will at least do the part of the program that you said you would do. And in this case, the part of the program is simply putting forward the application so that Business Oregon can decide if it's eligible or not. I hope that answers to your satisfaction. I'm still loath to give complete strategy on how to, one way or the other.
I think you've said what you can.
That was an extreme amount of legalese for sure, Joe. So basically, there is a chance.
And there always is.
Yeah. Councilor Spoon?
Yeah,
And then-
so I understand what Councilor Hensley asked. I understand that there's a motion on the table. My question is, since that motion was made, we had a conversation about there being, sorry, I'm trying to flip back to the screen that has it. There was a conversation about there being local requirements in addition to any Oregon requirements. So my question is, when do we address whether or not they meet the local requirements? I mean, I maybe disagree with Joe. I think Business Oregon determines whether or not they meet Oregon's requirements, but when do we determine whether or not they meet the local requirements written out in the SIZ agreement?
Joe, do you have anything on that piece?
Well, my legal answer before was that the statute is written as the county is the one who requests this to move forward. I see that Jamie's actually moving forward. Jamie, do you want to say what you think you're talking about? Will you accept an answer from Jamie on that one?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I'm interested in hearing what Jamie says. Yeah.
Okay. I'll allow her to sit here. I'm going to actually, per the governor's order, I'm going to wipe down my area that I've been sitting. And then I'm going to let her come up to the mic.
Hi,
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to add one part, which is that Artfish from Business Oregon does have copies of the strategic investment zone as it relates to Clackamas County. And so when we were discussing with him what steps the company needed to take, he was the one who also helped to highlight the first source contracting and the first source hiring agreements. So I don't know that, and I'll put it back to Joe so that he can give his legal answer, but that I think at the Business Oregon level, they are aware of what Clackamas County's requirements are as far as those 2 points, the first source hiring and contracting.
But do we know, my question was really more, who is the body that determines local eligibility? Because I don't know I think it's Business Oregon's, by statute, it's Business Oregon's job to determine if they meet the state requirements, but who determines if they meet local requirements? That's really my question.
And my answer is, according to the statute, it says the county is the one requesting it. It literally says that the county is the one that carries it up to Business Oregon, and the way in which they do that, they have to have an agreement with the city in place, the standardized agreement, and they have to take that up. And so I read that to mean that it's the county that's deciding to take it up.
Councilor Parker.
So Joe, if another company comes forward wanting to apply for the SIZ and they decide to go ahead and build their entire building before they turn in the application, is your advice going to be the same as it is tonight, to go ahead and forward it on, that we really have no leverage to get them to work with the county and develop an office of contracting?
My opinion is specific to this situation and these facts. And the reason for that is because, I know it's out there in the public that, there's been back and forth between folks at Business Oregon and what they're, potentially trying to do because of the timing of this application. That, and I know this was part of the minutes even in your consent agenda tonight, which is they were looking to potentially look at eligibility because there's still new construction after the date in which their application came in. And so I think they were trying to parse that out as what was constructed before the application came in and whatnot. So to answer now your hypothetical, if all construction was done after the application date, I think that would change it. I think that they would have missed the mark. I think right now what I'm advising you guys to do is at least don't move the goalpost so much that they can't get in front of Business Oregon and make their own pitch, and everybody who's against this can get in front of Oregon and make Business Oregon and make their pitch about why or why not they should approve or deny this, and wash your hands of it, frankly.
Okay, so we've got a call for the question on the table. So,
According to Jurassic Parliament, this motion requires...
Sorry.
okay, so with that being said, with the call for the question, are we ready for that, or is it time? Is there desire for more dialogue?
Yeah, we lost you, Brian.
You lost me.
Yeah, you went.
Am I back?
You're back.
Okay, so Councilor Hensley has called for the question.
It does require a second. I don't believe that the line of conversation is relevant to the motion on the table.
Okay. So, is there a second for the question? So you guys want more dialogue? Okay. So I guess the call for the question. What's that, Counselor?
Oh, I'll go ahead and say what I was going to say about everything. I think it's relevant. And then
I said I would withdraw my motion.
Because I mostly had questions up until this point of clarification. So are we not voting on the resolution then that's in the packet, first off? The motion on the table is not the resolution, right?
No, that is the motion. The motion is what was in the packet.
So, but we have, so we have a resolution in the packet, but the resolution says something different than what the motion is. I want some clarity on whether or not I'm approving the resolution or agreeing to the motion. Because the resolution includes authorization of the application, and that was not in the motion that was made. No one said I move to approve resolution, this and that. The motion was very specific and excluded an entire part of the resolution.
The motion that I proposed was directly out of our packet on page, sorry, I put these on, I can't see, page 18, directly from the proposed motion.
Right, I understand that. My question is, we have a resolution in the packet, and the motion says nothing about whether or not we're approving the resolution, and it excludes an entire part of the resolution. So my question is the intent that we're approving the resolution, or is the intent that we're agreeing to the motion?
I'm sorry, ask the question again, because I'm trying to compare notes here between what's here on page 18 and what is listed
Right.
here on the agenda.
Maybe I disagree with the proposed motion in general, because the resolution is two things. It's authorizing the application and agreeing for the city to go into IGA, right? But the motion does not cover both of those things, and the motion says nothing about approving the resolution. So I'm just trying to get some clarity on whether or not the intent is that we approve the resolution as in the packet, or if we just approve the portion of the resolution, which is what the motion sounds like.
Thank you, Counselor. I appreciate that. So, because again, on the agenda, it's a resolution authorizing Columbia Distributing Strategic Investment Zone application and authorizing the city administrator to enter into a contract. with Columbia.
Right, but the proposed motion only covers a portion of that. So I'm just trying to get clarity on what we're voting on, what the question is.
Thank you. So it's either so to me, Joe,
Yes.
we need to be approving what's on the agenda, that language, not the proposed motion at the bottom of page 18.
Or you could just say, I move we approve Resolution 1330, and then read the rest if you want it as well.
Okay, if we're approving, see, my vote is, I mean, it's a different question to me. So if we're talking about the resolution as a whole, then I have a slightly different opinion. And now,
So Councilor Berge, I would need an amended motion, sir, then to be more in line with what's on the listed in terms of verbiage on the agenda.
So I move to approve resolution number 1330, a resolution authorizing Columbia Distribution Strategic Investment Zone application and authorizing the city administrator to enter into a contract with Columbia Distribution.
Great.
And
Councilor
Clackamas
Hensley?
County.
Pardon me?
And Clackamas County is the other portion of it, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
That's an amended motion?
And as soon as Councilor Berge adds and Clackamas County.
So he's amending the motion. I still second.
No, he's not amending. Joe's just pointing out that the text of the resolution says and Clackamas County.
So we withdrew the other motion?
Correct. The original one that was written down on page 18 under proposed motion in our packet, I withdrew. And I redid the resolution from our agenda on line item number 7. And at the very end, I also added and Clackamas County, which was also in page 18. So I kind of merged the two together.
Gotcha. Second.
Okay. So the motion on the table is from Councilor Berge is to approve resolution number 1330, a resolution authorizing Columbia Distributing Strategic Investment Zone application and authorizing the city administrator to enter into a contract with Columbia Distributing and Clackamas County is what's on the table. Any further conversation?
yes, now that I know what we're voting on with clarity, thanks for that clarity. I was a little bit confused. So I'm just going to say that I'll explain my vote before we get there. My exception to the application is not punitive. The application deadline is clear and ambiguous, and I understand that we are not the enforcing body, but I'm not going to authorize the application as it is. I think if we start capitulating on requirements, then the next company wants some grace on a requirement, then we're in a cycle of a Pandora's box. Our city staff told us in a previous meeting that they have emails with Columbia documenting their awareness that they could potentially qualify for the SIZ no later than April 6, 2018. That's a whole year before they broke ground. They had ample time to read the application, and they either elected not to do so, or they willfully chose to disregard the requirement that is written in bold on top of the application. I think they had an obligation to do their own due diligence, and they had the time and the means to do so. I don't think we're obligated as a body to bend over backwards and set what I think is a dangerous and ambiguous precedent for companies that might come behind them because Columbia failed to complete the task at the top of the application. I understand, like Councilor Dale said, that they may have expressed intent to apply for the application, but by waiting until after they've started construction, they get their cake and they eat it too. It's supposed to be a win-win. They have no obligation to uphold an entire portion of the agreement that's supposed to be a win for the local community and local businesses. I think allowing this to move forward is government at its worst. It's a bunch of bureaucrats deciding that a large corporation should get a tax exemption, regardless of what the law says, regardless of the fact that the company made an error of negligence on their own account. Locally, we expect our small business owners, our small family-owned businesses, to jump through expensive hoops that cost them significant amounts of time and money. Just this last fall, we had a business that was held up for weeks because of a requirement that seemed insignificant and like it really shouldn't have applied to them, but it cost them a lot of money and it threatens their business. But here we are talking about letting a multi-million-dollar company from another town get away without following the rules at all. I object to it. I think the government should treat all applications equally and with respect to the law. I think the only way to do that is to not modulate on requirements on a case-by-case basis. And I'm not willing to compensate for Columbia's negligence at the expense of our first responders, our taxpayers, and the school children. I think they're as obligated as everyone else to follow the rules and accept the consequences if they don't. So I'm going to be a no if we're authorizing the application.
Thank you, Counselor. Appreciate that.
Does the picture change if we don't authorize the application and we just move it on?
Well, I question maybe to a certain extent. However, to me, I think that there are local requirements that they didn't meet as well. And so I don't think I'm frankly not ready to move it. If the question is, do I want to have a conversation with the other taxation districts about how the community service fund is done? Yes, I would like to do that. Am I ready to move this forward to Business Oregon, which is the actual impact of agreeing to the IGA? I'm not ready to do that because I don't think they meet the local requirements. I don't think they made the state requirements either, but that's not my job to determine. I do think that we have some authority over whether or not they meet the local requirements, and I think the SIZ is clear that they're expected to sign the first source contracting and use that agreement and those guidelines for constructing the actual building, which they didn't do. So do I want to have a conversation with local taxation districts? Yes. I think that we have some authority over our local requirements. I don't think Columbia met the local requirements. I understand it's not my job to determine if they met the state requirements, but there's kind of three questions there, right? So a little bit, I want to have a conversation with the other taxation districts, but I don't want to move it forward to Business Oregon because I don't think they met the local requirements that are in addition to the state ones.
Council President Dale, anything else?
Councilor Parker's ahead of me.
Okay, Councilor Parker.
Well, part of this involves keeping faith with our citizens. If I don't pay my parking ticket on time, it doubles. If I don't get my books back to the library, I get a fine. There are rules. And when staff initially presented us with this information, they gave us a copy of the application. And at the top of it, in bold, it said, this must be filled out before construction begins. What I'm afraid of is that, and I keep asking, how do I explain this to citizens? What I am afraid of is that this comes across as us simply defying common sense, that all of us have to live by rules. And there is a simple rule, and no one yet has been able to explain to me why a $500 million corporation couldn't read bold-faced type. So I'm going to be opposing this because of just common sense.
Thank you, sir. Council President Dale.
Mr. Mayor, what I go back to is also good faith in another way. Do I think Columbia adhered to the big requirements? Obviously they didn't if the timelines don't jive. But I'm concerned about, though, is that this council entered into agreement a decade ago to participate in this program. I'm concerned about the chilling effect that this could have on future businesses, especially if we're entering into a recessionary time. We do have a good faith to uphold on the part of the part of the city's agreement as well. There's a big part of me that says if we can make Canby Fire whole, then we take the generous high road and we forward it on to Business Oregon. And that's the hearings venue for making our grievances known about not satisfying the local requirements. I think I could live with that. So, that's where I am. My tendency is to vote yes and to carry the battle to Business Oregon and deal with our grievances there, and that we work with the county to make Canby Fire whole.
All right. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Question. I think it was part of, and Jamie, I may need your help on this. I think it was part of Art Fish's response is that Business Oregon Commission does not act as a hearing body, that they do not hold public hearings, that there is no avenue for us to go up and testify, that's not how it operates. That's my memory from that public records dump, which was a discussion about how Business Oregon, which used to be the old Economic Development Commission, but I don't think they take testimony. So, Tim, everything you're talking about, us being an advocate, I don't think there's an avenue for that.
I don't know. I know that the DOJ does a staff report.
I hear Joe talking.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We're kind of having a sidebar conversation, Jamie and I, about this. My understanding of the hearing is that the body is voting, and they're voting on the application, and what they're at least looking at is a staff report that's put together by their DOJ attorney. So I believe there would be an avenue to reach out to the DOJ attorney and bring up all of these. I am actually not knowing whether or not Business Oregon takes public testimony at the time or not, and I'm sorry, I don't know that.
So a question for the council, Mr. Mayor, may be, do we feel that there is any value in a 2-week delay to research these questions?
I don't know.
Well, I would be a no tonight, but if we got different answers to the questions, I suppose my vote could change. I'm always open to new information, but I mean, I'm open to delaying it for 2 weeks if we think we're going to get answers to this. It matters to me if we can't take testimony directly to the hearing body, because I think this is our chance to advocate for our local requirements. I think this is our opportunity to advocate for our citizens. I think it's clear that they didn't meet, as you said, Councilor Dale, the big requirements of it. And if this is our opportunity, then I think we have an obligation to, I I don't feel threatened by a big company. I think that we all need to do what we think the right thing to do is, and I'm not going to feel bullied or threatened by anyone to do differently because I'm afraid that they might pursue some action of some sort.
No, I'm not particularly afraid of them. I mean, right is right, and Canby has a bit of a tradition of being defiant in that face anyway. I'm concerned about how we define doing the right thing, right? How do we honor our agreements, honor any previous discussions with Columbia? How do we make the fire department whole? I don't want to kill the deal on technicalities. That's why I've mentioned several times getting to the ideological matter behind it. On the other hand, we want to do the right thing. I'm interested in the thoughts of the other counselors.
I'm sorry, I want to answer that though. I think that's a fair question, but I want to make myself clear. This isn't about ideology. I'm not having, I mean, if they had fulfilled all the requirements, we wouldn't be having this conversation, right? It would be an easy yes. They did everything they were asked to do. The program is a legitimate existing program. So I just want to make it clear, this isn't an ideological concern of mine. I'm open to having the conversation about the SIZ down the road. This is specific to this application.
Interested in the thoughts of the rest of the counselors.
So I've heard quite a few talking about how Columbia Distribution did not turn in their application in time. However, what's not being said is that the entire time working up till that, they were working directly with our city. Our city was helping them because this is the very first one of these that's came into Clackamas County. It's the very first one to come into Canby. So our city has been working directly with them the entire time. Did that time come and go and then they began their construction? Yes, they got the concrete slab poured before the application went in. Did anybody at the city that was helping them put that together know that was happening? From everything I've heard in the past, yes, they did. So we can't just be blaming Columbia Distribution saying that they didn't turn in their application in time when they were working hand in hand with our city. They were working hand in hand with Business Oregon, and they were trying to figure this out together. It's kind of like anytime something new comes about, you've got a learning curve, and it takes a little bit of time to figure that out. My impression is that they didn't have a complete grasp of all of the requirements. That's why they were working directly with our city. And I'm not sure who at our city they were working with. We know the Art Fish, but it sounds like by the time they figured that out, they were one step ahead. That's why I don't hold much water on the technicality approach to this, that because they didn't turn in their application in time, we should void this out. I mean, that's going to set a really bad precedence if anybody else wants to come in and try and work with our city on anything else as well. So it's not that they're a giant corporation that we're afraid of. It's the you don't get to the 11th hour and pull the rug out from underneath somebody, because no other company is going to want to come in and work with our city to try and make the next one happen. So.
And Councilor Berge, to that point, if I remember, and again, it's been a while, but with all the back and forth with Business Oregon and the email exchange that had gone on with Art Fish, it seems to me that Business Oregon was hand in hand with Columbia Distribution, distributing from the outset. So to me, I think that's to your point. Like, is Business Oregon going to allow this to fall through the cracks in terms of the application? Because this is the first one in, I think, Clackamas County, period. So there's a lot of hands holding this to move through this. So, so is it they got it turned in late, or was it yeah, we got it, we know you're going to apply for it. Now that's the piece that we're waiting or that was discussion with DOJ, right? Like, when did that, there's nothing that I've seen that said, a piece of paper that said, hey, go ahead and start construction. But I find it hard to believe that Columbia would start construction without a positive confirmation or a clear indication that they had that go ahead. Councilor Parker?
I can see how the votes are going to go down on this, but let's not do revisionist history. In the February email from Art Fish, he said, quote, "I feel deceived because I was not aware that construction had begun, that my previous comments about this being able to proceed was based upon my belief that construction hadn't begun." Art's position changed completely once he became aware that construction had already happened. So, let's go ahead and take our vote, but I'm not going to allow revisionist history that Business Oregon was not aware, according to the February emails that we got. And he said, I actually feel deceived by Columbia Distributing on this.
So then this is going to be a bigger issue then between Business Oregon and Columbia then. Okay. Councilor Varwig, did you have something?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to give my piece on it. And, the biggest thing for me and my biggest hesitation is how this is affecting our other taxing districts. And obviously, tonight's about the agreement and not about the community service fee. We can deal with all of that later. But that's where my hesitation comes. It's not so much the technicality of when it was, when the application came in. Obviously, we've learned a lot through this process. Was it done perfectly? Absolutely not. But we've learned a lot from it. If this happens again, we know better now, right? You don't do everything perfect the first time you do it. Did we make mistakes? Maybe we made mistakes along the way. At this point, though, the question is, do we move forward with this agreement? And we can work later on making people whole. There's a time and place to do that, and I think that we absolutely have a responsibility to do so. That's where my hesitation comes in. I will fight for the fire district. I want them to have their money. I do. I promise you that. But we need to get past the technicalities, I believe, of this situation. Understand that we've learned a lot from it. We will do better next time and go from there. But let's worry about making everybody else whole with the next step where we have the ability to do that.
Okay, well, we have a motion on the table. Councilor Spoon.
Yeah, I do have something to say about technicalities that, when it came to a landowner on 13th and Ivy, we held them to technicalities. And now we're saying that technicalities don't matter with an enormous tax abatement and a corporation. And I think that's inconsistent with the behavior we expected our citizens and our landowners that have lived here to adhere to certain technicalities that they in no way could have known were different than what they were told by city staff, right? But now we're saying that technicalities shouldn't matter when it comes to a giant corporation and their impact on the tax and the taxpayers and the residents that live here. And I object to that. Let's not pretend that we haven't held other people to technicalities at great expense.
I don't think it has to do with the corporation. It doesn't have anything to do with how much they make or how much they spend. I think what it has to do with is that this is the very first time that we've ever had this SIZ come before us. 13th and Ivy might not have been the first time that we had that come before us. So
the special district, it was the first time. Yeah, the special area of concern.
Councilor Parker.
And Councilor Varwig, I appreciate your comments, but I will push back on the one thing, because I've heard no evidence, no testimony, no indication to support your quote, "We made mistakes." I do not think city staff made mistakes. I think city staff, everything I have seen in the reports and in conversations and correspondence, I don't think that's a correct statement. Maybe it was inelegant on your part of saying we made mistakes. Maybe you just mean the universe as a whole. But I want to stand up for city staff. I don't think our city staff has made any mistake. The people
It
that
was a
made the mistake-
hypothetical. It was a hypothetical. I said, did we make mistakes? Maybe. I didn't say that in fact we did.
The person who made a mistake was the person who signed that paper and didn't turn it in according to the instructions. I have seen no evidence that city staff made mistakes, and I don't even want the hypothetical out there that somehow our staff was in error.
No, Mr. Mayor, which takes me back to, I think city staff worked in earnest and in good faith to make this happen.
Absolutely.
And as well as our previous city administrator, I'm very concerned that that's what we did as a city. Our intent was clearly to move this forward. And that's where I feel like the honor is. And as I've said, probably the fourth time now, I think we move it along and we make Canby Fire whole. Even at our own injury, we make them whole on this. And we also get our grievances to Business Oregon through whichever channel it is. If there's no hearing, we can talk with them. We can get it to the DOJ's office, whichever way Joe determines.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so I'm back to the point that there's a motion on the table. Been first and seconded. Okay. I'm looking, so is there any other comments or discussion pieces? Okay, so with this motion, I need a vote for, so the motion on the table was resolution number 1330, resolution authorizing Columbia Distributing Strategic Investment Zone application and authorizing the city administrator to enter a contract with Columbia Distributing and Clackamas County. That's the question on the table. Is there a call for the question?
I agree. We have to figure out how to make taxing entities whole and how to go forward with this program in the future. It does need to be looked at, but I do call for the question on this motion at hand now.
A second for a call on the question.
Second.
Okay, question has been called. So all those in favor,
End debate.
the motion, sorry, thank you, to end debate and move into the vote.
Aye.
Lots of aye.
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 Okay, so unanimously, question's been called, so there's the motions on the table. So all those in favor of the motion that's on the table?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm seeing, do I have 4 ayes? Do I have 3 ayes?
Keep your hands up, aye.
Councilor Berge, what is your vote? An aye. Councilor Dale?
Aye.
Is an aye. Councilor Hensley?
Aye.
Councilor Parker?
Nay.
Councilor Spoon?
Nay.
Councilor Varwig?
Aye.
Okay. Motion carries 4-2 to approve resolution number 1330. All right. Thank you all. I appreciate that. Joe, we met the requirements for resolution 1330.
We have.
Okay. Thank you all. I appreciate that. Resolution, next on the agenda is resolution number 1332, a resolution adopting a revised City of Canby drug and alcohol policy for use with Department of Transportation regulated employees and identifying an effective date and repealing resolution number 1281. Joe or Amanda, who's tackling this one for us tonight?
Hi, this is Amanda Zyber for the people in the audience or out there tonight, and I'm the one that put the resolution in front of you, so I'll be happy to talk to you very briefly about it. The city has an adopted drug and alcohol policy, which we must have in place for the city to be eligible to receive federal FTA grant funding. The DOT policy that we have in place covers our CDL drivers and mechanics that work on transit buses. In February 2018 was the last time that we updated this policy. Last year, the city, Federal Transit Administration periodically, excuse me, it conducts, excuse me, I just totally lost my train of thought, I apologize. They do audits, and the city was audited. And as part of that audit, it was a routine audit. Canby was selected as one of 9 subrecipients or contractors for site visits, including Canby Amber Transit. And as part of that audit, they reviewed our drug and alcohol policy and made some recommendations for updates, including some housekeeping and some minor changes to keep us in compliance with the federal regulations. So we made those updates. We passed that on to our collective bargaining agreement for review. They did not have any feedback, and so now it's in front of you for approval.
Great, thank you, Amanda, appreciate it. Any questions for Amanda on this particular resolution?
No,
See a lot-
Mr. Mayor?
Yes,
I move to adopt Resolution 1332, a resolution adopting a revised City of Canby drug and alcohol policy for use with DOT-regulated employees and identifying an effective date and repealing Resolution number 1281.
thank you.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Hensley and seconded by Councilor Berge to approve resolution number 1332, a resolution adopting a revised City of Canby drug and alcohol policy for use with Department of Transportation regulated employees and identifying an effective date and repealing resolution number 1281. Any further conversation or discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? That carries 6-0. Moving into new business, item A is the approval of the declaration of emergency, page 97 in your packet. For those viewing at home, basically the crux of this is that on March 17th of this year, I issued a declaration of a state of emergency for the city of Canby with Clackamas County. And I'll read the paragraph and what this does. So taking this action triggers the regulation and control powers vested in the Canby City Council under Canby Municipal Code 2.52.070. It allows the mayor and city staff greater flexibility to quickly address hazards posed by the COVID-19 virus by facilitating more expedient coordination with public agencies and quicker deployment of resources and staffing to safeguard the community. It also provides for the ability to modify work schedules of emergency responders to meet reduced staffing or increased emergency responses due to the COVID-19. The state of emergency declaration provides the city with the latitude to coordinate an effective response by redirecting funding for emergency use as needed and suspending standard procurement procedures. Additionally, the designation aids the city's efforts when requesting assistance and or reimbursement for expenditures related to the COVID-19 virus response. So that was the declaration on the 17th of this year, put into place with conversation with Amanda and our fire chief and those at the Emergency Operations Center. Again, like it says, it just puts us in a better position in case things get to a point where we need to bring in more resources. We were one of the first cities to do that for the county, so hopefully we'll, and Amanda and Joe are just looking for council approval of the declaration, correct?
Mr. Mayor, I want to applaud your early action on this. This is turning out to be a crisis where early action is good, and the encouragement that it gives other cities, and indeed, I dare say, our own county, to also act. And I would ask the council to ratify the mayor's declaration of emergency.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Second.
I'm sorry, who seconded? Thank you. So the motion's been made by Council President Dale and seconded by Councilor Hensley to ratify or approve the mayor's declaration of an emergency. Any conversation or discussion on the matter?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. Okay. All those in favor, I guess, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed to that? That carries 6-0. Thank you. Next up is approval of the city administrator hiring standards, criteria, and policy directives. So this, like, again, remind everyone, earlier we held a work session at the beginning of the evening to discuss the recruitment process for a new city manager. And these basically just kind of, as we set out in that workshop, pretty much that the job description and what we're looking for still hold true. And that stays the same, that we're looking at a national search for a city manager, with not necessarily an emphasis being a regional candidate. We're looking nationally for a candidate, and we've asked the recruiting firm to bring back a recommendation or of a salary survey to make sure that that we're being competitive in what we are seeking in terms of our candidates and how can we be competitive pay and benefit wise. Is that my proper recollection from our earlier conversation, council?
Yes, sir.
I'm seeing
Sounds right.
lots of head nodding and approval. Thank you. I'll take a motion to approve that piece.
So moved.
Second.
So motion's been made by Councilor Council President Dale, and second by Councilor Varwig, to approve the city administrator hiring standards, criteria, and policy directives. Any further conversation regarding that or questions for city staff?
Oh, good.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
I'm hearing 6 ayes. Are anyone opposed? Not seeing any. That passes 6-0. Thank you all. I appreciate that very much. City administrator business and staff reports. Ms. Cyber.
Thank you. Yes, I do have a couple updates, and I'll keep them very brief. We have been consumed with all items COVID-related, but I just did want to give you a quick update on some of the projects that are in process and are still moving forward. We'll start with the Quiet Zone and the Grant Street Arch project, and I'm talking about those two together because we are having a lot of coordination done together on those two. The bid packages went out this week, and there is a pre-bid conference scheduled for next week. If there's no further delays and we can continue to move forward, we're probably looking at construction starting in June with a September completion. The splash pad, we're moving forward with the design, still hoping for a July 4th opening, but with everything else, there may be some delays. South Ivy Street project has 30% plans currently being reviewed by Public Works. The Hazeldale Signal project, if you've been out and driving around, you'll know that it's moving forward. They're currently waiting for some decent weather to pour the rest of the sidewalks. The signal poles are scheduled for delivery at the end of May, with operation hopefully by June 1st of 2020. The South Ivy Street pump station is on schedule and currently has no delays. Scheduled completion is August 9th of 2020. We have a bid opening tomorrow for the wastewater treatment plant new clarifier project. And due to our social distancing, we have worked out an email submission process for that. And lastly, we're moving forward Wi-Fi in the parks. That whole program has been delayed a little bit. Several entities that are involved, including a grant that Direct Link was moving towards, has been delayed. So we'll have more on that later this month. Thank you.
Amanda, thank you very much. And please, those that are there and those that are, as you talk to them in the coming days, thank them for continuing to move these things forward in light of everything that's been going on, obviously with the virus and the things that we've had to do and check and adjust as a city. I appreciate your leadership there at City Hall, as well as everyone staying focused on continuing to move these important projects for our city forward. They're important, and I know that with a big piece like this, there's a tendency to put them on the back burner, and I appreciate everyone staying on it and doing their due diligence to get these completed. So thank you very much.
You bet. Thank you, and I will pass that on to staff as well.
Thank you. Counselor Parker, did you have something?
I wanted to thank Amanda for keeping the Wi-Fi in the parks alive. This was something that I brought back 3 years ago from a Main Street conference, and it really even seems more appropriate these days. We don't know how long it's going to be like this, but the opportunity for our citizens to appropriately social distance in our parks, but have the opportunity to read books, listen to music, whatever. I think it fits into part of being a community. So it's certainly not the most important thing on our agenda, but I do appreciate you continuing to push that one along particularly.
I would concur. In these times of having to be self-quarantined or self-isolated or whatever you want to label it, you know what, connectivity is important. And my work with the Suicide Prevention Task Force is going to actually be addressing this issue because this is going to have a significant impact on the community. And so anything we can do to promote connectivity, however we can do it in these times, I applaud it. So thank you.
Thank you, and I also want to recognize and acknowledge that this is a partnership with Direct Link, and this is for 3 parks, which is Waite Park, Legacy, and Locust. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And appropriate parks those are, so thank you for keeping that going forward. Council President Dale, did you have something?
Not directly related.
You were unmuted, that's why I thought I'd ask.
I did want to share that I'm in a fairly strict quarantine situation. And I wanted to share with the mayor and the council that as I have been forced to go out to do things like procure food, not that I need it for myself, but you understand, and gasoline, just a shout out not only to our great businesses, the gas stations, Fred Meyer's, the Cuts Force, for their courage to stay open, their hyper diligence on cleaning and such, but also a shout out to the people of Canby. When people are running even to the toilet paper aisle, right? They're respecting their distance, but they're smiling, they're saying hi, they're being courteous, they might yell it from 20 feet, how are you doing? But
Right.
it's, in a tough time, I just want to appreciate, Mr. Mayor, the spirit of Canby's people. It's been good, it's been healthy, it's been encouraging.
I think that's a great summation on what has been occurring. And thank you, Tim, for that. I appreciate it. Melissa, I'll take an action review, please.
Okay, you've approved the consent agenda, approved Resolution 1330, approved Resolution 1332, ratified the declaration of emergency, and approved the city administrator hiring standards, criteria, and policy directives.
Great. Thank you, Melissa. I appreciate it. If there's nothing else for the good of the order, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Oh,
So moved.
wait, hang on. Sorry.
Greg was smiling while I was bloviating, so.
Yeah, Councilor Parker's finger went up before the wire there. Councilor Parker?
I wasn't going to mention it, Tim, but as the sun went down, all that's left of you is your lit face here. Our citizens aren't able to see this yet. What I did again, Amanda, thank you. Joe, thank you, and a very special thank you to our city recorder Melissa, who pulled off something we have never done before.
True.
I mean, if we would have talked about this a year ago, I would have said this is science fiction. That's way in the future. And Melissa pulled this off in a couple of weeks. And Melissa, thank you. We are grateful to have you on board.
Very good.
Thank you. I'd love
As
to
the
help.
council, as the council nerd, whenever we get back together, I'll make sure with council's consent that we give her the Nerd Award. It's a high honor. I have not awarded that many times, but Melissa, above and beyond, thank you.
Means a lot, thank you.
Well,
Mr.
thank
Mayor,
you
I
all.
move we adjourn.
So the motion on the table to adjourn, is there a second?
Second.
So moved and seconded. All those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Bye.
I see 6 yeses. Anyone opposing it? No? All right. So we are adjourned. Canby, good night. I hope you enjoyed our virtual meeting, and we'll see you maybe in 2 weeks or 1st of May. Thank you. Have a great night.